Hello, everybody. This is Outrageously Me, a podcast for outcasts and a note to self. This is all of me, your host, Sri, and today I have a special treat for you. I have my friend Claire Padulka here, who's going to talk about a lot of things which you all going to relate to. Let me introduce my guest today. Professionally, Claire is a chief of staff at TXI, a product innovation consultancy. Personally, she is a mom, wife, daughter, friend, writer, cook, and the list goes on. And a proud Chicagoan. She is good at saying no and is learning to say, please help. And other than this, I have to say, I really love talking to Claire. She's one of the person who helped me out when I became a father. She taught me some of the tips that I can use with my husband as well as my kid. And we're going to chat all about it today. Hi, Claire. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Sri. It's great to be with you today.
It's great. I mean, it feels like this is bound to happen. And we've been chatting so well with each other. And I think this is the right time. We put that into some sort of a journaling situation where people can learn from it. And I've been getting a lot of value from you. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind.
Okay, let's start with saying no because I'm really, really excited about talking that because this is one of the things that I also struggle with saying no to people. I'm a people pleaser. Some of the side effects of what I've gone through. But I understand now that saying no can be an ultimate self-care. So can you please talk to us about why you landed up in saying no, first of all, in your professional role, and how does it even help you with your personal, role that you play within your family and friend circle?
Yeah. I love the word no. There are a few words in the English language that I am completely obsessed with, and no is one of them. I think no is a beautiful word, an underrated word. Personally and professionally, I guess, I'm a project manager at heart, right? Like this is how I came up professionally, and you have to say no a lot as a project manager because your job is prioritization, right? Which means you have to say no to lots of things so that you can say yes to the right things and really commit to that yes, right? And it's easy to say yes. It's exciting to say yes, right? Like you want to take on new opportunities. You want to be enthusiastic. Some of us were raised, you're talking about people pleasers, right? Some of us were raised as people pleasers. So when your boss comes to you with an idea, you want to say yes, right? You want to please them. You want to get ahead. You're worried that if you say no, it's the last time anybody's going to ever offer you something, right? And I think that there is a lot of power in saying no because it means you're really clear on what you want. You are clear on what you are saying yes to, which means you're going to have to say no to a lot of other things. And there's a lot of power in the word.
Wow, I really love that. And I really love the way you flipped it. When you're saying no, you're actually saying yes to a lot of things that you're mindfully choosing what you're saying yes to. So that's the flip side of saying no, because often we see no as exactly what you said. Like if you're people pleasing and if you're in a work environment where you have to work with a lot of people, like you're a manager or something, it is very difficult to position the no, and probably flipping that and saying that this is a no, but I'm saying yes to ABCD. So that will also help you justify the no. But I also hear no is not a word, it's a sentence by itself, right? So, and as you said, it's a beautiful word. So we're going to talk more about how you come to this position of saying no and being a project manager, a writer and a cook and a daughter and a friend and all of these things. So take us back to the root of all roots. How does the story of Claire begins? Like, where does it start and how does it influence you to be who you are today?
Yeah. I mean, it all begins, how I grew up. And I was thinking about this question and thinking, in some ways, the way that I grew up prepared me like perfectly for what I'm doing now. And in some ways, it makes no sense whatsoever. So I grew up in a really wonderful family, right? I grew up with two amazing parents who they have this incredible ability as parents that I aspire to also. And I'll share this with you. You can do this with your son, to just truly believe in me as a capable person, right? From a very young age. Like They respected me. They trusted me. They knew I was smart. They loved me and they supported me. They're like, whatever it is that you're going to do in this world, you're going to figure it out. You're a very capable person and you will figure it out. Even when I was doing things that probably made no sense to them whatsoever, right? As a kid, I loved poetry and I wanted to be a poet. That was what I truly thought that I was going to do with my life, right? I was going to be a poet and I wrote poetry all the time and I read poetry and I went to, they somehow sent me to like poetry writing workshops over the summer. And like, we were a working class family, right? We did not have a lot of money for this, but they like figured out how to make it work. So they believed in me. They're like, we're going to support you. My parents knew that poet wasn't a real career. They knew that I wouldn't like probably be a poet. That's bonkers, but they trusted that I would figure it out. They were like, this is important to her. She is capable. And she will, whatever this becomes, like Claire will figure it out. And that's like an incredible foundation to have in life. I hope I can give my kids half of what they gave me in terms of that confidence to just, yeah, you are strong,
Yeah.
you're capable, you'll figure it out.
But coming back to the poetry, I'm so excited about your parents letting you do what you wanted to do. And this is something I'm learning as a parent myself. Like, with simple choices with the kids, it's easy. Like the other day, I talked about having my kid having to have lipstick on himself and how much it really shook me to the core whether to say yes or no. And then I decided to say yes because I thought if I were the kid and if I asked my dad about, having to use a lipstick and what answer would I wanted to hear. So that was something that helped me to say yes to my kid. But with poetry, it's a whole new ball game. It's going to be like a career, right? And you rightly mentioned that may not be a lucrative career at this point. So where did it start and how did it end with, did your parents ever say no to you? Because we are talking about saying no as well.
I mean, certainly they said no to me in the way that parents always do, right? They kept me safe as a kid, when I tried to run into the street, say no. The one time that I can truly remember them saying no was I had it in my head, and it's funny, I'm just remembering this. It's not a thing I think about very much, but I had it in my head that I wanted to start college early. I was in high school and I was a smart kid, got great grades, right? School has always been like a really easy thing for me. And I was growing up in the suburbs of Chicago in a place that I did not feel like I fit in, right? I had like my kind of core group of friends, but we were the weird theater kids, kind of gothy, punky. Like I said, I was a poet, right? Like all of these things. And I did not feel like I fit in with the very upper class, like very preppy world around me. And I wanted more than anything, I wanted to go to New York City and become a writer. That was it. Like I was going to move to New York City. I was going to become a writer and I didn't want to wait. I was going to graduate high school at 17, but I wanted to go when I was 16. I wanted to go a year early. And I did all this research.
Oh, wow.
And I did all this research and I found schools that would accept, a year early admission. And I'd worked out the credits at my high school so that I could graduate. And I was like trying to make it work. And very wisely, they were like, no, that is not a good choice for you. You need it. You have another year. You can make it another year. We're going to take another year. That's how it's going to be. And it was 100% the right choice. Like they, as parents are, were much wiser in terms of how the world worked and saw me really clearly, knew I needed more time. Because the fact is, I did graduate at 17. I did move to New York City to go to NYU and study journalism. And I could not hack it. Like 17-year-old me moving from the suburbs of Chicago to living in Greenwich Village at NYU, highly competitive, right? I wasn't in my high school where I was like one of the smartest kids. Now I'm in with all the smart kids and a bunch of really rich kids who all have all this privilege that they're coming in with. And I'm just like trying to keep up in my classes and I'm far away from home for the first time. I didn't realize how lonely I would be without my family, without those like core friends that I'd had who honestly to this day are still some of my dearest friends. And I was, working too many hours at a crappy retail job and, all of the things that are like the turmoil of being 17 and a freshman in college. And I absolutely couldn't take it. And I wound up transferring. I did my first year at NYU and I knew that it was not healthy for me to stay there. I would not have a good life and I would not have a good experience if I stayed there, and wound up transferring to Northwestern, which is where I finished my degree. Northwestern is also in the suburbs of Chicago,
Okay.
maybe an hour from where I grew up. But yeah, I couldn't even hack it at 17. So the idea that I would have gone at 16, even younger, even less prepared, it is very good that they said no to that idea.
When I was hearing you talk about from going from suburbs to NYC, I hear the song in back of my head, like the Glee song. I don't know if you know this song. It's just a small town girl
Oh yeah, yeah.
in the midnight train. So that's fantastic. So you being a poet at the young age, I think I can definitely see that reflecting in your personality now, because you have the way with words, and every time I speak to you, I was like, oh, she speaks so eloquently. So I think that comes from that place. Now I understand. Do you remember any of the poems you wrote? Do you have anything to share at the moment? I don't want to put you on the
No,
spotlight, but anything
absolutely
do you
not.
remember at all?
No, not at all. I don't remember any of them, and frankly, if I did, I wouldn't share it. There are some things that belong in the past, and angst-filled, self-important teenage poetry belongs in the past.
Yeah, but who did you like as somebody you want to read to in terms of poems or stories? Because you were a theater kid, so who inspired you?
It's interesting. It's changed a lot over time. When I was a kid, my favorite poets were the beat poets. So Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and Burroughs and all of these people. And I read a ton of their poetry. That's one of the reasons I wanted to go to New York. New York is like one of the meccas of beat poetry.
Yeah,
And, there's sort of like some of these like original rebels kind of a thing was the picture I had in my mind at that time. And just absolutely ate up everything that I could read by them, about them. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started to realize, wait a minute, like, where are the women? And there were some women beat poets, right? Diane DePrima and many others were there. They were present. Where are the people of color? There are a few Black
mm,
poets that became really well known, Amiri Baraka and others, but, the beats were greatly influenced by people of color and they were greatly supported by women, but they weren't really front and center. It was a bunch of white guys for the most part, right? And so it wasn't until I got a little bit older and started thinking, okay, so who else is out there who I should be reading?
mm,
And I'm
mm.
very lucky to live in Chicago, and Chicago has a really rich tradition of live poetry, poetry slams, and there are fantastic poets who are coming up today. And as I've kind of returned to poetry, I've started picking up more of these like Chicago poets, people from Chicago, Jose Oliveras and Nate Marshall and Fatima Ashgar, and people who are more contemporary, but of many genders and of many races, and trying to just broaden my perspective of who I'm reading. Because like my experience personally is really limited, right? Like I am a white woman from the Midwest of America, and
Mm.
I can learn and understand other people's experiences. For me, of course, meeting people and like talking one on one, getting to build relationships, but you can build such a broad perspective by
Yeah.
reading people's art, right? And like hearing their voices through poetry, through literature.
I so agree. Like, this is what I think. Like, I used to read Sidney Shelton books. That was one of my first books because my native language is different, obviously. And then when I started reading English books, I started with Hardy Boys. And I was
Mm-hmm.
studying this. I mean, I was reading this in college. Like, I know it's too late, but Friends, Hardy Boys, Sidney Shelton, Paulo Coelho, these are the people who helped me with my language skills. And uh, when I started reading Sidney Shelton, and some of my friends asked, like, why are you into so much books? Because it's not very common for the community that I was from to read a lot of English books. I said,
Mhm.
if I speak to one person and if I be friends with one person, I can understand how this person thinks and reacts and what are his aspirations, what are the ideologies and things like that. If I read a book, there are at least three, four characters, and I can get into the heads of these characters and I can understand how they think and how they react, and it helps me to understand people better, and also helps me with my English skills and everything. So I totally get when you said that art can give you that spectrum of experience that you can help with diversity and inclusion and all those things. But I'm curious to know, like, on the whole, while you went to NYC, and we have something to unpack there also, you said you felt like an outsider, like you felt you didn't belong because you're from a small community and a lot of people are smart there, and you felt, a bit not uh, home with yourself in that space. So let's talk about that first. And then we can move on to talking about what point did you feel that you have to research for more writers, specifically on the writers of color, writers of, different sexual backgrounds and things like that.
Sure. So first part first.
Yeah.
I think going to New York was one of those first experiences of just the broader world, right? New York City is massive and dense in terms of people, dense in terms of the pace, the intensity, right? And you just encounter so much stimulation all at once. Um, and I think it was an early experience for me of trying to figure out how do you find your place. And at the time, I don't think I had a solid foundation, right? I'd moved places. I transitioned in life from living with my family to, living in a dorm, effectively being on my own.
Yeah.
I was studying new things and managing work and schedules and managing money in a different way. And there were just so many new things in a new place that I did not find solid footing. And it wasn't until honestly much, much later in my life that I feel like I did regain that solid footing to where it became easier for me to put myself out there and move in new spaces. The past, I would say 10 years or so, really being able to see myself as, oh, I can exist in the world of tech, which is something I had not imagined would be part of my career. And, feeling some of those same feelings of going to New York as a teenager, even as a person in my 30s when I started in tech. I didn't start a tech career right away. I had, 10 years of working experience behind me before I started working in tech, and feeling some of that imposter syndrome. Who am I to be in this room? Who am I to join a startup and try to build a product from the ground up? Who am I to go into this high-powered consultancy, right, where these people are clearly incredibly smart and super high caliber, and wait a minute, they want me to join the leadership team? Who am I to step into that room? Those doubts, even from an early age, creep in. And that's where I say those early foundations that I had of, my parents instilling in me, you are a capable person, that was still in there somewhere, even though I'd spent years being in uncomfortable situations or making the wrong choices in terms of career or relationships or cities to live in or whatever it might be. There was still something in me that was like, no, you're going to do it anyway. You are capable. You can do this. But yeah, certainly those early experiences were challenging.
I love that. I love that your parents has instilled that in you. Can you remember any sudden experience that really flipped the switch in you from going from, oh, I don't belong here, to, oh, yes, I'm capable of doing it here, either in New York or in this, being a tech consultancy, being a part of a consultancy, being part of leadership team? Are there any instances where you go from that, no, I can't do this, to flipping a switch? And if you so, how do you do that? How do you do that for audience who are listening to us?
I don't think you can do it alone is key. The instance that sticks in my mind is when I first joined TXI, which is the company I'm still with now. Now I'm chief of staff, right? I sit on the leadership team and I have for many years. But when I joined, I was, and I say this with this is not false modesty. I think I was the most junior project manager they ever hired, right? They were, I think, taking a chance hiring me. And I'd never managed custom software project before, and I'd never been a consultant before. So I had relevant experience, but not direct experience. And I was working on the product discovery for a brand new startup in the elder care space. And we'd gone through a whole week of discovery. We'd met with the client. We'd understood their needs, their goals. We'd sort of shaped an MVP. And then it was up to me to put together the final proposal. Here's what we'll build. Here's the size of the team. Here's what it'll cost, and put it all together and pitch it to the client. And so I did. I pulled together my spreadsheets, and here are all the estimates, and here's our, team rates and everything. And I pulled it together and I sent it off to the client without asking anyone to look at it first. And the client says, "Yep, looks great. Let's go put together official paperwork, SOW." And I start to pull together the SOW, and there's kind of a spidey sense tingling for me. We can't really do all this work for this little money, right? Come to find out, I had made a mistake in the spreadsheet. Just a simple formula, fat fingers, right? And I had screwed up. I made a mistake. And I was terrified, right? This proves it. I shouldn't be here, right? I messed up. I made a mistake. Oh my, I don't belong here. And I realized that I couldn't hide this mistake, right? If I didn't speak up, it would only be worse later, right? So I went to sort of the more senior consultant who was on the project, this guy, John Gore, who I love to this day, and just flat out told him, I was like, "John, I messed up. Please help. Please help." That's one of those words I'm trying to learn still, right? And he's like, "Yeah, okay, we're in this together. Let's figure it out." And he helped me fix the mistake. He coached me on how that conversation should go with the client. He didn't have it, but he coached me on how it should go. He made sure I knew, here's what you do in the future. Here are the templates that you use so you don't fat finger a formula. You always have second eyes on a proposal before it goes out the door. So he gave me the feedback that I needed, and he supported me through it. And that was the moment that it turned from "oh no, I don't belong here," to an, "Oh yeah, this place has me. I do belong here because we were in it together." And that for me was just the moment where I was like, "Oh, this is the place for me."
Fantastic. I really, really love, I'm having an aha moment here, as, Oprah would put it. So the idea of I don't belong here to I belong here, and you being a leadership role now, you totally understand how to create that sense of belonging within the workspace where people support each other. And also when you make a mistake, how do you handle it yourself? Do you want to hide it? Do you want to say it to people? And do you want to own it? And that transition of owning it and then asking for help, which is something that you're still learning. We are going to get there. So I really like that. So I don't belong here. I made a mistake. So therefore, yes, my assumption of I don't belong here comes true. And then how do I navigate this? And then throwing hands up in the air and say that I need help. I need help. And then going from that position to learning and then belonging to that position. Fantastic. I really, really, really love that. And how this experience of, first of all, let's talk about how did you say yes to this being part of the tech company? Like you said, you had a career before that. So at what point did you say, "Oh, okay, so this might be for me. Let me try it out"? I know you did try out the new NYC and all other things. So that gave you the idea of trying new things. But how did you even try to be part of the tech? How did the opportunity came to you?
I was bored. I was
That's
really
a good answer.
bored.
Yeah.
I'd spent the early part of my career in education, for the most part, education publishing, think textbooks, right? The big fat textbooks that we would use in the 90s and 2000s, right?
Yeah, I
And
think you were part of Thinksuck or something, right? You are the editor,
I
right?
was. I got there. But before that, I worked for a big company called McGraw-Hill. They published tons
Okay.
of textbooks. And I worked for them for many years, like 7 years. And as happens at big companies, there was a layoff. I got laid off. And I just sort of took the next job that was available to me because I had rent to pay, right? Like you do.
Mm,
So I
mm,
was a project manager at the time. I took a project management job at a telecom company, and big enterprisey, which is what I was used to at the time. Um, and I was very bored. There were many
mm,
nice things about it. I worked with some great people. It was the first time I had exposure to design thinking. First time I participated in ethnographies and user research. Really
mm.
introduced to some of the foundations of innovation work that I do now. Those were all great things, but the fact is, it was a very hierarchical, bureaucratic
Mm,
company, very slow to
mm.
move, and I was not at a place where I wanted to just sit in a cubicle wearing uncomfortable clothes from Ann Taylor Loft that I bought on
Wow.
discount. I did not want to be commuting out to the suburbs every day. I did not want to spend an entire day formatting PowerPoints. Like, I needed something that moved, something that was
Mm,
impactful and meaningful. And just so happened, a friend of mine from my earlier education days had gotten to know the folks at Think Circa, which you mentioned is a literacy ed tech product that they were just developing. And
mm,
that to me that was meaningful. That was impactful. It was really small. It was like 5 people at the time, right?
mm,
Had just gotten some seed funding, like a very, very early stage, and needed someone to come in and basically wear a lot of hats and manage content and do project management and do some editing and also build culture and operations and hiring and, all of the things that you do in the very early days of building a company together. And I knew that I needed something that I could really sink my teeth into, something that I could really make an impact on the company and on the world. And um, that was the turning point for me, was needing something more.
yeah, I really also understand this from your perspective of, learning art and learning to decrypt the art into understanding what I can learn from here, what people's art can give me, and also learning your footing into different environments and being in different places where you can create impact because you are inspired by art. Art by itself creates impact. And that
Mhm.
is what I think has helped you navigate different places and find rootings in places where you can make an impact. One question we actually forgot is that how did you, move from looking at a specific scriptures written by alpha white men, as you would put it, and you also talked about your experience as a white Midwest person growing up, and where this turning of wheels happened, where you exposed to different cultures, where you wanted to expose yourself to different cultures, where you understood the idea that everybody exists and we got to find these voices and learn from it. So, where did that transformation happen for you?
If I'm being honest, embarrassingly late. It is certainly something that I think it kind of always been somewhere in the background, right? I was raised in, for the time and for the place, a pretty progressive home. Um, Certainly have always like been around more left leaning people. But when I grew up, what sort of quote unquote progressive people believed is like, you don't see color. And so I grew up
Mm,
with that mentality of just like, well, no,
yeah,
everybody's equal. We're all one human
yeah,
race, those kinds of messages, because that was the common thinking among like progressive white people at the time.
yeah.
And as I grew up and became more exposed to more different kinds of people, some of that, through college and through living in Chicago, which Chicago's a tricky city for race, to put it bluntly. It's very diverse, but it's very segregated. And so you can live in Chicago and not live around, if you're a white person, you cannot live around hardly any black people, hardly
Mm,
any Latina people, hardly any Asian people, depending on where you choose to live, right? And where you
mm,
work and all of these things. And, like many people of my demographic, the election of Donald Trump as the president really shook something in
Wow.
me, to say, really? That's the country? That's really it? And, following on from that, certainly the Black Lives Matter movement, the murder of Black people by the police becomes more something that I'm conscious of. It wasn't new, but it was something that I became conscious of. It became more present. And truly, when Trump was elected, and I sort of came to that reckoning of, oh, people who look like me are, we can swear on this podcast, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. People like me are fucking up this country, right? We are destroying this country. And we have been for, I don't know, centuries. Like, it was, again, embarrassingly late in the world. I was in my 30s, but that was the reckoning. And since then, it's the littlest thing, but I have not read a book by a straight white man since then, because I know what they think. I read that canon when I was young. They have governed every piece of culture and policy that I have grown up in. That's what my family is full of. Like, I mean, smart and kind and well-intentioned white men, but like, there's a lot of them. I get it. I've had enough of that. I can go and seek other things. Obviously, I also vote. I also donate to many causes. I also do other things to be like a politically active community member. But that's one of those things that, like, truly in the past, however many years that's been, 7 years, I've not read another book by a straight white man, because I
love that.
Don't need it.
Yeah, I love that. And this happened to you because you saw what's happening around you and you were sensitive to the change that was happening around you. And Black Lives Movement was something that came onto our face, even for a non-white person. It really brought me to the forefront of what we are dealing with in terms of race and in terms of bias and diversity and everything. So a lot of people find it very hard to reinvent themselves. Like, the idea of what is me is actually not static, but it's dynamic. It keeps on changing. As you said, it changes over the period of time. Like, your taste in art changes, your interest in what you want to do changes. And together with that, our identity as who we are and how we look at ourselves also changes. So what do you want to tell people? Like, you allowed yourself to change from that. I'm the Midwest white person to, this is all happening around me and I have to change. So there was this switch that flipped for you. But a lot of people get stuck in the idea of identity, and that causes them a lot of internal conflicts. And I think that comes out as hatred. So what do you want to tell people in terms of viewing ourselves and changing ourselves and reinventing ourselves?
It's hard to admit that you're wrong, right? It's hard to admit that you were ignorant, willfully, sometimes ignorant, right? That's not what's prized in this culture, right? For everything that we talk about, in big tech, it's like fail fast, right? And like glorifying the failures on the way to success. But that's not tended to mean personal failures. It's like product failures, right? Oh yeah, we launched a feature and it didn't hit. Great. It was just a prototype. It was just MVP. Like, let's move on to the next. There's a different kind of reckoning that you need to do for a personal failure. I don't think I have a magic secret to it. I don't think I'm especially good at it, to be honest. I think there are a lot of times that it's easy to retreat into the fact that I am like a really privileged person. And there are plenty of things that happen in this world that I don't engage with, and I do turn insular sometimes. I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by a community that is very diverse. I've intentionally chosen to live and raise my children in a very diverse community that has a lot of like new arrivals to the United States in it. And we have friends of many different races, and just because those are the people who are around us now, right? Because where we chose to live, it's much easier to meet and know people like that. And same thing with the company that I work at. TXI really values diversity and inclusion and belonging, right? And we do work with people of many different backgrounds, many different races, and we have open dialogue around this. We have regular time and investment in DEIB work. And those are some of the things that help broaden my perspective when there might be a moment of either moment of stress or a moment of fear that makes me turn more insular, because it's easy to do as a person of privilege, right? To say, oh, I can just shut that out, whatever the world event might be. But I have people around me who make it more present. And I'm very grateful to have that kind of community. Yeah.
Love that. And what I take away from that conversation is that you said it's hard to admit that we are wrong. So I think that really resonated with me, even for a person of color, and even not talking about diversity and inclusion. Just to admit that we are wrong and moving on from that place where we can unlearn certain things and learn certain things. I think it's a common thread that connects us all. And I'm really interested to know about, you admitted when you made a mistake, and you admitted when you were wrong, and you said several times in this podcast that you failed in some of the initiatives that you have taken to become a poet or something. So how do you look at your imperfections? Like I'm going to call it imperfections because I want you to understand what we are aiming at here, but these are something that you may choose not to look as imperfection or something as part of you. But I want to understand, like, in the world's eye, there are certain things that are maybe labeled as imperfections within yourself from the way that you think about yourselves. How do you handle that?
That's a big one. I'm trying to think of the direction to go in. I think of how important it is to me as a parent, and tell me if you relate to this as well, is I mess up as a parent, right? I'm a good parent. I love my kids. They're incredible humans. And I still mess up, right? I make the wrong calls, or I'm tired and I yell, or I'm short with them. And the thing that I have found to be the most valuable, it's taken a lot of therapy to get there, but the thing that I found to be the most valuable with
you and me both.
every human, any human with a mind and a heart should do therapy. If you take nothing else from this, therapy, it's the best. But learning to make the repair, right? You messed up, and there is a school of thought that you could use as a parent. And I think it's more old school. I don't think this is present anymore. But where the parent is the authority figure. And so you never back down, and you never admit you're wrong, and you screw up and you just move on. And maybe you do it again and you just move on. And the thing that I have found to be the most important, and this is true in parenthood and in work leadership, right, is own it. Say, man, I was feeling really stressed out. I should not have yelled. That was I felt frustrated, and so I yelled, but I should not. You didn't deserve that. And next time I'm going to take a breath first, or next time I'm going to walk out of the room first, and then we'll come back and try again. I'm sorry.
Love that.
And that's huge for the relationship, right? It's not about me being the best parent at all possible moments, because frankly, aiming for perfection there is the thing that makes me worse at being a parent, right? The pressure that you can put on yourself, right? Same thing with being a leader. If you need to be on and perfect at all moments, you can't. You will crack.
I love that. Oh my God. I really, really love that. This is a aha moment for me. So learning that maybe I would put it this way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Trying to be perfect is what creates the stress, and not being able to do what we are set out to do as a parent, as a leader. And learning that we are not so perfect, and owning those imperfections and owning that part can help us to be better at what we do. Isn't that beautiful? Wow. I really loved your answer here. This is $1 million right here for people to hear this podcast. And also take therapy. But it's interesting because you're still learning to say, please help. And you say we have to take therapy. So there might be a situation when you became a mom or became a parent that, your identity is changing and the way you see yourself is changing, and this pressure of trying to be perfect, and then, oh, I can't do this, I have to take help. So let's talk about that. How does that impact? Like, when did you go from, oh, I can do this, I'm a perfect parent, to I need help? Like, and how can you lean in more towards seeking help?
That is an everyday conversation with myself, to be
Wow.
just truly honest. This is the number one conversation slash debate that my husband and I have, because I am so fortunate to be surrounded by people who want to help, who can help. My husband is an
Mm,
amazing father. He's an amazing partner. He is smart and capable, and I could say lots of nice things about him. But the fact is, most of the time, I have this tendency to take over. This is kind of the
mm,
kryptonite side of when I was talking about the way that I was raised, right? And how much it has helped me to be,
mm,
to feel capable, to feel smart, to feel supported. Like I can go do that. The shadow side of that, the kryptonite side of that is I can do everything. I got it. I can
mm.
handle it. The number of times that my poor husband has had to hear me say, like, I got it. Don't worry about it. Like, but he can also do it. He's very
Yeah,
smart and capable, right? But that's
yeah,
my instinct, right? Always, I got it. One more thing. I can put it on. I can pull it. I can juggle all of these balls, right? All at
yeah,
the same time.
yeah.
And that is just a constant process of, uh, when we were in the depths of the pandemic, it was a really hard time. I had
Mm.
taken my first executive role in February of 2020. Great timing. Like
Great timing, I
nothing was
know.
about to happen there. Um, I found out in March, like very beginning of March 2020, that I was pregnant with my second kid.
Oh no.
And then a week later, lockdown happened.
Oh no.
And, and then, then there was about 2 years that I kind of lost, right? I was waking up in the morning, quote unquote, waking up in the morning, because I wasn't really sleeping very much, what you do when you have like two very young children.
Yeah,
And so going on almost no sleep, parenting until the kids left for school, if they had school that day, because probably one of them was sick, and then working back to back 9 hours on
oh
Zoom
my
because the
god.
tech world was exploding, right? More work than we could handle, trying to hire as fast as we could for all the qualified folks we could get. Just an absolute scramble of good things, but nonetheless
Yeah,
stressful, until the very end of the day when I would, kids were home and then it was dinner and then it was baths and it was all the things. Well, I was probably on my phone on Slack still, right? Like still trying
yeah.
to do the job. And then I would just like pass out at night. And then of course be woken up many
Wow.
times during the night with an infant. And I did that for a year and was just cracking. Like I could not take it anymore. It was damaging my home life and it was damaging my ability to do my work and my health. And it just had negative repercussions across the board. And it really took, it sounds overly dramatic to say like I hit rock bottom or something like that, but it was a very hard time. It
Yeah,
was really painful. And it took getting to that really painful place to say, something's got to change, right?
yeah.
I cannot function at this level for this long without relief.
Mm, mm. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's the most vulnerable time of your life. I can't imagine having to go through pandemic, stuffed inside the home with two kids and work that's, transferring everything the way we thought about work, and then the Zoom calls, and we didn't have proper desk environments where we can take calls, and we were scrambling with a lot of things. So how do you take care of yourself? How do you self care?
Another work in progress. I'm all work in progress. Like I've figured out so few things.
I think we all are. We all are work in progress. And I think that's the right way to look at it. But what are the things that you do to take care of yourself? And this is more important for me as a new
Understood.
parent.
Well, I'll share some things, then you share some things because I can learn from you. Therapy. I already talked about therapy. So important.
Yeah.
Um, I did for a time work with an executive coach. which was very helpful. She was specifically focused on executive mothers. And so understanding the pressures of home life and being a woman leader and all of that was very helpful to have her support during a period of transition for me. I read poetry again. I think to come full circle,
Wow.
I had not read poetry for a very long time, and it's hard for me to find long chunks of time for self-care, right? I've tried different things. I've tried going for runs and doing yoga classes, and frankly, those things just take too much time that I can't do them every day. But I absolutely have time to just read a poem every day. So I keep a book of poetry on my bedside table. Got one by Nate Marshall there now. And it takes a minute. You always have time for a poem. And so to just sit, not look at a screen, right? It's a paper book, and sit quietly, nobody else around, and just read one poem. Sometimes I read it out loud because the sound of poetry is just so beautiful and very refreshing. It's a very different way of speaking and hearing and thinking than I do in any other part of my life. And so that's kind of a new thing. Yeah. Well, buy yourself a book of poetry. Who do you like?
I like Rumi. Rumi is my favorite. I don't know if you read Rumi. Yeah, I do have a book of Rumi. I visit this poetry again and again because sometimes you want to look at it, and then the same poem, if you read it again, will give you a different meaning depending on where you are in your mental space. I really love that. Read a poem. There's always time for poem. That's what I take away from this. I also do therapy. I'm fortunate to have a few of my neighbors who also have kids at the same age. So they are open to having play dates. So when I'm overwhelmed, I text one of them to see if they're available. Just drop my son because, it's just been 7 months and he's 5-year-old and we didn't have time to grow up as parents. So it's very difficult. Sometimes it's really, really overwhelming. And also telling my husband, like, I'm reaching my emotional limit, that I would be cranky and I don't want to be cranky around him. And also telling my son, I would tell my son that, Papa feels cranky right now. Papa feels tired from work and everything. Papa needs some me time. So why don't you have your time? You can either play with your toys, or you can paint, or you can even see iPad. And, we have created specific rules around screen time. I know some parents really don't want to have screen time, but I think there are a lot of good shows out there. Like Bluey, for example, is a wonderful show. You can just play it and they learn a lot from it. I love that. So I think we are reaching our time for the podcast. I know we have talked a lot of questions, but I also loved the way the communication or the conversation was flowing through between us, and we were trying to learn from each other, and I love that. So one important question I want to finish off with is that, what is outrageously me means to you? What is outrageously Claire?
So I would never think of myself as outrageous. I think of outrageous and I think of like somebody who dresses really flamboyantly, or somebody who's very extroverted, loud voice, always in motion, like very kinetic.
And are you describing me?
I may be. I see those nails. I love them. Oh, yeah. But for myself, I dress in jeans and t-shirt pretty much every day. I don't wear makeup. I am introverted. I can be quite soft-spoken in person. One-on-one, I can do this all day. I love talking to you. But if I were to walk into just like a networking event or a party, I would probably just like grab a drink and stand by the wall for a minute and be very awkward. But as I think about it, it is somewhat outrageous. I can claim that word, in that when you are a leader, when you're a tech executive, right? These words that are kind of hard for me to claim for myself. Executive still feels very awkward to me to claim, but it's accurate. It's very bossy. I use the phrase with a friend of mine that I often feel like 3 raccoons in an executive suit. Like we're all just dressed up in a trench coat, just, like trying to pretend like don't let anybody see the raccoons. But that is how I am outrageous, because I don't have to be that character.
Yes.
I don't have to be
Yes.
that stereotype. You can be a leader and be soft-spoken. You can be a leader and be a woman. You can be a leader and, sort of feel quiet or plain
Wow.
and none of these things stand in the way of you being a leader, because this is authentically who I am. I can't fake that other thing. It drains me immediately, and everyone could tell it was fake, right? One of my superpowers as a leader is that I can be authentic. I just show up as who I am, and hopefully that makes it feel more okay for other folks to show up how they are. And
love it.
That's my outrageousness.
Yeah, that's being outrageously you. I mean, like, even when I asked you to come on board with a podcast without, preparation, and you said no, and that's being outrageously yourself. I think you're choosing to say no and choosing to say yes, and dictating that from the core of who you are. And, that I really love. You're a poet in making. You're poet in work in progress. What you do in your work is poem. And I really love all your LinkedIn post about how to handle people and how to handle leadership roles and how to communicate better and how to do better in the job. I think you're constantly reinventing yourself and claiming that words that you find it really hard to claim, and self-care and self-love and reading a poem one at a time. I love all of that, and I really understood what is outrageously Claire today and where it started with all this capability instilled in you by your parents, and trying new things and failing at new things and owning that failure and moving on and being sensitive to surroundings and learning from that and moving on and adapting and learning and adapting and learning. And I really love the way you shape yourself from your young age to now. And one thing I've taken away from today is that when you are making a mistake, own it and then ask for help. That's really, really beautiful. That's really beautiful. That can apply to any situation. And also take therapy, and also read one poem at a time. I love all of that. And listeners, this has been a great show, and join me in thanking Claire. And if you have come here, I'm going to put all the contact information for Claire. Go and bugger in the email, and also add her in LinkedIn. She's a fantastic leader to follow. It's all going to be in the description. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast, Claire. I really love what you've shared with us, and looking forward to more and more chat in conversation in person, also in LinkedIn, and interacting with your posts. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Sri. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I always love chatting to you.